Welcome to this episode, and I'm very happy to be talking to Diamond Drip here. We're going to be talking about shame, fear, self-doubt, and how we can overcome all of that. And I'll just welcome Diamond. I love your name.
Thank you. It is so good to be here in your energy field.
You're a coach, a speaker, human design enthusiast, and you're on a mission to help women to break free from who do I think I am and step into their awesome. This is such a beautiful way of putting it. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to do this.
Yeah, for sure. So I had my own personal self-discovery journey after I participated in a clinical trial that used psilocybin, which is the active component in magic mushrooms that healed my depression. So through my stumbling around trying to figure out how to integrate those things post trial being over, post everything that happened, I was on a personal journey of self-discovery, trying to figure out how to integrate things. And then I was trying to figure out how to rework my life in a way. Because at the time of the trial, I was a business owner of two businesses. I was in school pursuing my visual communications degree. And I'm also a mom of a 7-year-old, but she was 3 or 4 back then. And it felt a lot like I wasn't in control of my life. It felt like my businesses were running me. It felt like I was doing a bunch of things. And it was becoming really clear that those things weren't necessarily fulfilling. They were making me happy in moments, but overall it wasn't pulling me towards what I now know is my purpose. And so I had to figure out how to make my business, make my life match something that actually brought me joy every day. And it was through that discovery process that I found the tools that I use now in my business, human design and gene keys, that helped me to see my unique gifts, my unique superpowers. They helped me to see the areas of my life where I had leaned into fear and self-doubt and took what the outside world was telling me was what was supposed to happen and running with that. It helped me to see areas where I could have created my own stories, created my own beliefs. And
Such a trial. I never heard about it. This is really cool. I went on the trial. This is really cool start of the journey. Yeah.
yeah.
And I know like experiences can really open up something new in us. And now I can see the picture of the mushrooms in the background. Now it has a deeper meaning.
Yes. Mushrooms are in everything that I do now. They were like a little catalyst for me in this new beginning, this reawakening.
I know some people get quite scared about psychedelics, but actually it's a really good, what is the word? Like not a motivation, but actually really awaken something in us, catalyst that can bring lots to the surface. And it sounds like it did bring lots to the surface for you, and then you found your way of working with it, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Even post trial, I still microdose. So I've met a few people who are further out in the 5D space, the spirituality space, and they're able to connect with their higher self without the inner critic being super loud. I'm working my way there, but those people, they say that the psychedelics are like training wheels to getting to that space because it helps you get out of your own way. The psychedelics, psilocybin specifically, it helps lower your default mode network. It helps create new neural pathways so that you're not constantly telling yourself those old stories that are keeping you stuck. It helps you be able to create new stories, new pathways, and new ways of saying things.
Mm. And if we talk about, and maybe you can define like shame, right? If we start with the shame, and I know it's such a difficult feeling, and shame really keeps us in the dark, and it keeps us wanting to crawl inside ourselves. So I wonder, what's your definition of shame? Maybe you can tell us a story about your own shame. How can we deal with it? Because it's such a big piece that keeps us small, keeps us stuck, and we don't have the connection. I've just been working with a couple just now, interesting. And when we dropped into shame, they started to feel the shame. They completely lost connection with each other because in the shame, like you try to protect yourself and you go into that freeze place.
Yeah. Shame for me, in terms of like the definition, it's having this piece of you that you feel really protective over because you're not sure if it's going to be accepted. One of the situations that I can recall, and I love that this show is about like sexual empowerment and things like that, but I was sexually assaulted by one of my ex-boyfriends. So we had broken up. I had found a new relationship to be in, one that made me happier. And the ex, he wanted to talk to me. He wanted to meet in our old spot and just talk to me because he said that he was going through some things with his dad. And at that, I was a teenager at the time. And so naive is an adjective that's one might use to describe youth. And so I met him at our spot, and it very quickly became obvious that he didn't just want to talk, he wanted to try and do other things. And I ended up getting away from the situation before anything could really happen. Someone ended up coming through the door. It was a stairwell. Someone ended up coming through the door right as things were getting really serious. And I was able to get away in that moment. But I felt a lot of shame around
That's
that situation because it was one of those things like I beat myself up around it. Like, you should have known better. Like, why did you meet him there? Like, there were so many aspects that I guess I wanted to shield the naiveness. I wanted to act like I wanted to not have people think of me or look at me and say, oh, that was dumb of you to think that, like anyone else's judgment around my behavior or my actions. And so I feel like when you feel this shame, you do crawl up into a
yeah.
ball because it's like that piece of you that you just want it. You're just like, no, I don't want anyone to see this. I want to keep this here so that no one can pick it apart. No one can judge me for it. No one can do those things.
Which is becomes right. The shame is actually that fear of rejection. If you really see this about me, then you're gonna reject me. And we get
Yeah.
so scared, but it really freezes us and we keep it so close to us, and that's how it survives. Yeah. So I wonder, what are your ways of working with that, and what can you tell women who are dealing with the shame and feeling like I'm in a ball trying to protect
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah. So first and foremost is always take a breath. When you feel yourself in that shame, when you feel yourself curling into that ball, you're literally contracting. And so when you do something as simple as just taking a breath right there in that moment, you actually expand, right? You expand your belly as you inhale and exhale. And as you're taking that breath or taking those breaths, really asking yourself the question, how is this helpful? This was a new trick that I learned from one of my mentors, but whenever that voice starts getting loud and it starts saying things that are not helpful, they don't serve you, they only keep you stuck in the shame and the scarcity and the lack. It's one of those things where our brains are constantly programmed to come up with lists and come up with reasons and rationalize things. And so when you are in that moment and you're asking your brain, how is this helpful? And we know that reasons that stem from fear, that stem from lack, that stem from scarcity are things that are not good for us. So when we notice the pattern, that's all our inner critic is feeding us in that moment, you can actually start to challenge those things. And I find that it's helpful to challenge that inner critic after making room, making space inside of yourself to allow that to happen.
So feeling that shame and being there, and also like, how is this useful for me?
Yeah.
Where is this?
Yeah. Feeling it without judgment is something that is I didn't mention, but yeah, because so many of us we want to just hide it or push it down or make it go away, but sometimes actually feeling the feels, not becoming attached to them, not taking you back to that place, but actually just sitting in the feelings, letting them pass, and then taking back sovereignty by asking that question, how is this helpful? And challenging where these things are coming from.
Mhm. And I wonder, because I know like you do human design, right? Is there a relationship between where we're at in our human design and the shame, or is it all individual?
I would probably defer more to my work at Gene Keys when it comes to shame. There's actually 6 genetic wounds, and shame is actually one of them.
Oh, now I want to hear all 6.
So I only know a few of them. I am more familiar with human design. When I have a client who has one of those genetic wounds, then I'll dive deep into it. But the ones that I know
What do
off,
you mean by genetic wound? Like, what do you mean by genetic wound? Is it
oh,
that
that's
it
just,
comes from the past or like from your
yeah,
parents?
yeah. So genetic wounds, that's just how I learned. That's the terminology that they call them. But yes, they are things that are passed down from past lifetimes, from past generations. So that's why they're called like genetic wounds. There's the wound of shame, as I mentioned, there's the wound of denial, there's the wound of repression. And so each one is attached to a specific gate. When you dive deep into the Gene Keys work, it's attached to a specific key. And whatever that key is typically where you feel the most impact of whatever the genetic wound is. There are also sexual wounds, but a lot of the work that I do with clients is around human design. And if we have to go into the genetic wounds because something is holding them back that they're not seeing, that's when I'll usually look at the wounds.
So does it mean that, like the way you understand it, is that for some people, if you have that wound, then you're going to be more exposed to that shame, and it doesn't just come from this kind of life, but it comes from somewhere before. Because sometimes people are like, how come this is happening to me? Yeah, and some people are more like they feel that emotion more than other people, and they blame themselves. But if I hear what you say, is that it actually might be coming from somewhere else, and that's why it might feel so heavy, and it almost like gets you attracted to you in a way because of that past. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the sequences in Gene Keys is the Venus sequence, and they dive into karma and dharma and past lifetimes, what you've carried into this lifetime, into this incarnation. So yes, 100%. Some of the wounds that we carry are not imposed during this lifetime. They're from past lifetimes. Even in human design, there's a lot of reparenting that happens. I'm in a class right now with Karen Curry Parker, and she deals more with quantum human design. And even learning that our energy looks a lot, and it has similar characteristics to our grandmother's energy. And so there's this cycle of our children, their energy looks like our moms. And it's this constant reparenting, which is why a lot of parents, they get triggered by their kids' behaviors because it's an energetic match to what they experienced during their childhood. So there's a lot of reparenting that has to happen.
Well, but it's almost like happens on the physical plane, like parenting, because it's almost like I hear that, right? When I parent my daughter, it's in a way representation of my mama.
It just helps you work through some of those deep rooted pains. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, huh? Yeah.
It is
And
interesting.
so I guess what I'm hearing from you, and some people might not believe all of the spiritual stuff, but that's your perspective, right? Where what's happening with me right now, sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I actually, if it's really overwhelming, maybe it's not just this, what happened here, and maybe that's why I can't figure it out. And because I don't see the bigger picture. And if I really step into that bigger picture, then I can see more. And then almost like it brings a sense more of a sense of peace. Actually, oh, it's not just me. It's not that there's something wrong, but I just wasn't aware of the whole information field.
Yeah, awareness is so key. One of the modalities that I'm getting a certification in right now is called the Akashic Records. And so it actually looks at past lifetimes and the choices, negative or positive, that you've made to get you to this exact moment. Because time obviously, and obviously, like you said, this is what I believe. This is 100% a belief that, like anything. And so we had this original soul blueprint. And obviously, as people, we have free will. And so we have the ability to make positive choices or negative choices. And the more that we make of the latter, it knocks us off this path. It knocks us off our purpose here. And it can get really frustrating when you're so far off the path and you don't, right? And you're in this lifetime and you don't know the choices that past you has made in different lifetimes. And you're like, why am I so stuck? Why am I experiencing these things? And it can often be liberating to know, like, oh, okay, so this is what happened. Like you said, having the big picture, having the full scope, even if it stretches past, I just turned 29, the 29 years that I was here on this planet.
Mm. Yeah, so it's in a way freeing. And if I hear that, especially if women feel like I have no idea how I got here, right? And why am I here? And it feels like I'm actually not living the life that I'm almost like meant to live, huh? Like it's not quite my life, then maybe there's something else, something bigger. And also, I guess for people who don't believe in the past lives and all that stuff, right? It even could be that maybe you have no idea what actually happened to you, what happened in your parents' generation, because that's can be more acceptable, right? And I know the intergenerational traumas, but actually, if I'm carrying stuff from my mom, from my grandma, right, from my parents, and I can't, it's not just me, it's not just what happened for me in this life, but actually what they gave me, which is that's scientific, right? It does
Yeah.
pass down, so people to accept. But there is something that maybe they lived through that I have no idea what it was. And now I'm finding myself in this place where it doesn't quite feel right. And I have no idea how to get out from here.
Yeah, I was hearing about studies that were being done with like epigenetics and looking at the genes and how, like, I think it's like great grandchildren of people who survived the Holocaust. They were having these things, they were having this trauma that obviously they didn't know where it was coming from, but they were able to trace back the lineage, and they were in concentration. The great grandparents were in concentration camps, and that was showing up in them in this lifetime, holding them back from certain opportunities that they could have been taken. So it is, yeah, there's like, I love that. Yes, there are these spiritual beliefs, but we're in a beautiful time right now where science is actually catching up to what people have been saying for like years and years and centuries.
But sometimes, right, it's easier to accept, okay, that just comes in genetics, right? That's my building material rather than
Yeah.
some thing, which is, yeah, just different perspectives. But so I guess what the main point, right? It sounds so useful to actually really see it. If I'm stuck somewhere and I can't figure it out, I need to almost like take a step back, zoom out, and see a bigger perspective. And maybe it's coming from somewhere else. Yeah. And maybe I can't even identify it, right? But taking that load is like it's all my fault, because I guess that's where it comes, right? That it's not that it's my fault, that there's something wrong with me. And there's quite a lot, especially if they're struggling in relationships or in their sexuality, that they go into that belief there's something wrong with me. And this, like your perspective, brings that bigger vision. I
Yeah.
wonder what can I say to women who find themselves right now in a place like there's something wrong with me. My life is not quite working out. What can you
Yeah.
tell them?
Yeah. So what I would tell them is the problem is not you. It's right. It's
Can you say
almost
it again? Can you say it again?
the problem is not you. And interestingly enough, and I know, like you said, women come to you because they're having trouble in their relationships. I just finished reading this book. My partner and I actually read this book. So it was like really cool to be able to talk to him about some of the things, but it's called Come As You Are. And it's talking about like women's sexuality and how some of us have spontaneous desire versus responsive desire, how some of us have just all of the ways that we're different. And because we live in a culture where it's patriarchal, and so women would make themselves wrong because they weren't like men. They didn't get all hot and heavy and bothered just by seeing a man like walk across the way. And so
This is
it,
so important, right? The difference is when we compare ourselves to something, that's when there's something wrong with me. I have to compare myself to something to decide that.
yeah. And yes, exactly. And it's a saying that comparison is the thief of joy. And it's so true because when you're comparing yourself to something that is outside of you, and this brings in, I'll give a perfect example. So I did this thing called the Leadership Experience Tour, and there are a bunch of different speakers who grace the stage. And one of the speakers who was in my round, she calls herself an authenticity strategist. And she is just like so boldly and confidently her. And we were talking after, and she was talking about like her morning routine and how she eases into the day, and she like wakes up and goes to the gym and makes her smoothie and like leisurely gets onto her email at like 9:30 in the morning, and then just this super graceful way of easing into the day. And I was like, oh, that sounds so nice. Like, how do you do that like every day consistently? Like that's that's really cool that you're able to do that. And when I caught myself about to be in that comparison trap of like, well, what can I do to change or shift what I'm doing in order to have a more easeful, graceful morning, seemingly the way that she does? I caught myself and I actually asked her, I was like, do you know your time of birth? Because that's usually the most important piece that people don't know. They usually know where they were born and when they were born. And so she did. And when I looked at her energy, she was a projector energy type. And so projectors, they don't have a defined sacral. So they're actually said to be a non-energy type because they have to constantly check in with themselves to make sure that they know when enough is enough. Versus I'm a generator energy type. And so we're like the little energizer bunnies. We can just go and go and go. Like we thrive on having like to-do lists of things to do and getting a lot done in a day. And so when I looked at her energy and I was like, oh, like you're just there's nothing wrong with me.
I just
We're just different. Like literally energetically, we're different. That is aligned for you to have these beautiful self-care mornings where you ease into your day and you wait for invitations to have your expertise like shown as long as you're honing your skill, honing your craft, like that's aligned for you. I just so happen to do it differently.
There's this piece. It's almost like this is who we are, right? And we're different. But then sometimes it feels like this is not good for me. This doesn't fit me. So it's a different place. So
Yeah.
it needs, like, really need to differentiate. This is who I am. There's nothing wrong with me. Yeah. And this is what feels good to me. But sometimes when we find ourselves, actually, this doesn't feel good for me.
Yeah.
Because then something is off, huh? Like, what can you tell to them? Like, how can they, if they feel like, okay, it doesn't feel right. I need to shift something. What are the steps for them? Like what would they do?
Yeah, so it all starts with awareness, like recognizing that you're having these feelings of like something's not right, even if you don't believe in human design, which I feel like is the easiest way of just literally looking at your energy and seeing what's what. You can
I actually
always,
found it, I really find it helpful. So maybe you can like that actually get in your human design chat. Even if you don't believe in it, it can actually give you really good understanding of who you are, right? And actually that there's nothing wrong with me, because that's where we can check it out. Is there something
yeah,
wrong with me, or is this my design?
yeah. I was designed this way, right? Lady Gaga said it best. I was born this way. And figuring,
When it's like, yeah, there's so much energy, I have to do things. Yeah.
yes. But aside from pulling your chart and having that tangible thing there, I would definitely say the awareness is key. So really challenging your beliefs So oftentimes, well, all the time, well, oftentimes, because some people are adopted, et cetera, things like that. So oftentimes, from the moment that we're born, we're in our parents or our guardians, I'll say, energetic field. And so the things that they carry with them, their shadows, the things that they believe, they pass on to us. And then when we're old enough to make our own friends and go out into the school world, society, things like that, then we pick up our friends' beliefs and our friends' beliefs, right? That's why they always say careful of the company that you keep, because people will associate you and your thoughts of keep hearing the same things. When you think something over and over again, repeatedly, it becomes a belief. And society is the biggest one. They're constantly giving us messages with their marketing and social media and all of the things that are being pushed on us. And so what happens is in areas where we're maybe not as defined, we maybe don't have that energetic buffer, we take in those beliefs as our own because we're constantly hearing the same thing. And so we're like, well, I don't know, like it fluctuates what I believe, but it seems to be that society keeps saying this one thing. So maybe that's true, right? The perfect example is this whole idea that we work these jobs until, however long, right? I think it's like it was 55 at first, but I think it's moved to like 60. And then we retire and then we can go and travel the world and enjoy our family and do all the things. And because generations of people have believed this, we think, okay, well, I just got to suck it up. I just got to put my head down. And then when I retire, that's when I can live my life. Versus actually challenging where that belief is coming from and saying, you know what? What do I believe? I have always wanted to start a business. And maybe it's a line for me, or I have wanted to make this shift in my life with my family, and maybe it's time for me to do that. Actually challenging those beliefs that we grew up with.
Because it's like what comes for me, right? For my audience, right? For women, is feels the sexual, right? This is how I should be, yeah. I should have my spontaneous desire, and I should. And if it's not that, then there's something wrong with me. But that's been bring by society, and also how we should look like, right? The skinny kind of ideal. And then when I don't fit into it, then we start to feel like there's something wrong with me. But actually, it's the ideal that's wrong. And I'm just different. And that's my way of doing it. And I guess same with the other piece that I see women really buy into is that I have to sacrifice myself for the family, right? That I look after my kids and everything comes first and I forget my own pleasure. I forget to look after myself. And then when I kind of like, when they grow up, then I can spend time on my own fulfillment, on my own pleasure. And that's again, like, of course, I see how the whole family loses when mothers sacrifice themselves. They're not as bright and open, and there's the resentment a bit that comes in, and kids get it. But it's again, that's brought up by the society rather than what's actually really what's true for me. Yeah. So if I hear like they're really finding what's true for me, that's the first step, huh?
Yeah, and I love that you brought back the spontaneous desire, because even in challenging your beliefs, I love this book that I read. It'll be one that I read over and over again, but even understanding like we live in a society that feeds us these photoshopped images of what the perfect ideal woman looks like, etc. And it's crazy because I think they did an experiment where each country they put like the magazine covers next to each other because each country was different of what they were being fed was like the ideal woman. But in the US, I remember she made this reference that the woman's body was like a sign of achievement of the man. So in the olden days, before the Industrial Revolution, if a man had like a plump wife, it was like, okay, she could afford like the finer flour and the things in life. And so it was a sign of a man's success if he had a plump, round wife. And then the Industrial Revolution happened. And then it became a sign of success to have like this dainty, skinny wife because like she's so fragile that she can't work in the factories. And so to have a wife who was like this super skinny, petite, oh, if she picked up, I don't know, a sledgehammer, she would break or something, like that was a sign of success. And even, like I said, when you challenge your beliefs, when you really dig down to the root of it, you get to the truth. and you can decide for yourself what's true for you.
Because this is like as you speak, right? And I know, but the way you say it, it's almost like now when I compare myself to that perfect image, I'm actually wanting to be an achievement for a man, which is it's like it's so against what we want for ourselves. But somehow it's so deep inside of us that when I compare myself, that's what and I've researched that, and yeah, that's we became like we had to be small and skinnier, and we kept with that ideal, but actually it's almost like I'm an attribute. This is like that's when he achieved something. It's really
Yeah,
nice to see that, because then like my whole body goes like, no, there's no
right?
way.
No.
Oh, it's just like,
I
yeah.
rebel.
Yeah. It's really, yeah, I love the example. So what else yeah, as we come back.
Yeah,
I'm
right?
like
As we come back
excited.
from the
As we come
research,
back,
right?
yeah. So, and knowing we have maybe 5, 10 more minutes, like what are the things that you want to share with women as we talk about this, right? That who am I? What's right for me? And if I'm off the road, something doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say my first recommendation, like I said, is always going to be to look at your energy, see it tangibly. Aside
Mm.
from that, it would be to sit with yourself. So the Gene Keys work that I do, it has a lot of like shadow work involved in it, because we have to see the areas where we've lived in the dark, where we've believed things that have kept us stuck, in order to transform into the gifts and the higher frequencies of our existence here. And so many of us, we shy away from it. There are so many things that we can do to numb ourselves, right? We can smoke, there's drinking, there's Netflix and binge watching things. And
Nowadays,
he said,
very popular
yes,
nowadays.
exactly,
I think it's the
exactly,
drug of choice.
right? And so you may know that it would serve you well to just spend 30 minutes with yourself, 30 minutes just observing your thoughts, right? Meditation is something that we both probably talk about often, but it takes time. It takes the dedication. It takes the want to sit with yourself, observe the thoughts, see what's happening, being able to have that place of non-judgment as these things are happening. And so many of us, we don't want to. We go into this place of avoidance, but that's where the gift is. That's where the catalyst shifts happen, when we're able to sit with ourselves and to have those moments where we do challenge our beliefs, where we do observe how loud and how frequent the inner critic wants to speak up, and to actually start to challenge that and be like, how is this helpful to me actually? Why are you trying to keep me in fear? Why are you trying to keep me in this scarcity lack mentality, when what my soul wants, what my soul yearns for, is fulfillment and abundance and joy? Why are you trying to keep me in these stuck places? So really taking the time to be with yourself is something that, human design and Gene Keys gives you a map of where to sit and be with yourself. But even just doing it and taking the time, right? Starting 5 minutes a day, building up to 30 minutes, it can be so much of a game changer.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's coming that in that alignment, right? This is who I am. I'm not comparing myself to anything else, anyone else. Yeah, and how can I bring myself back into that alignment and move from that place? That feels good to me. And I find a lot of women are so scared because they feel like, oh, that's selfish. But actually, I truly believe that when we come into alignment with ourselves, we actually want to do good. It's not like that we're going to become selfish and self-absorbent. It's more that actually, then I want to do good. Then I want to bring my heart and move myself. And then everyone benefits. But again, I guess it's our culture, how it got screwed up a bit, that if I pay attention to myself, like even like for a woman, right, who's a busy mom and working mom, how can I allow myself to spend half an hour for myself? This is too selfish. But actually, then when we get out of alignment, it's actually I think the families, like everyone suffers. And I guess that's the biggest piece that I hear you say, and I really believe in it, that we really need to shift that selfish piece. We really need to shift that and start spending time with ourselves, because that's the only way we can go forward in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, like we hear all the time that you can't give from an empty cup. But when it comes time to fill your cup, you're like, oh, that's selfish. No, like that, you can't have it both ways.
I'm here with both ways. Yeah. So what's I think we can talk and talk, huh, Diamond? There's so many aspects. So, like, I didn't know the mushroom things. Like, whoa, this is exciting. But I wonder, what can you tell people? Like, how can they find more about you? What do you do for people with human design and all other things? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the best way for people to connect with me is to learn something about you. So that infamous human design chart that I keep referencing that you should check out, I actually have one on my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. And when you pull your chart, you have the opportunity to download a free ebook that's customized based on your chart. So it'll tell you how your design is meant to sleep best, how you handle overwhelm and pressure, and how your immune system is designed. So it can give you some really practical tips and strategies to start working with your energy. So the best way to connect with me is to learn something about you.
That's nice. And also I'll put it in the show notes so people can just click it and do their design. And I guess what I can say is that even if you don't believe it, if you think it's a woo-woo thing, do it and then see. And if you find something useful, that's good enough. You don't have to believe in the whole thing. But actually, yeah, I've done it for all my kids and my whole family, and I can see how the problems we can be facing, it's actually, we just design differently. Yeah, and then we'll come out of alignment. So it's two things. It's not just my design, but actually when I'm off alignment, I'm not in my design. And then the problems can happen as well. Huh?
Yeah, I love that you pulled your children's chart because that's what Ross says. It's like, of course, adults can use it to help self-correct and come back in alignment. But he always used to say, because he's no longer with us, that it's for the children. It's so that we don't push our stuff on them and
When my
live.
daughter was born, like that's what my daughter was born. I did human design for her, and she's a manifest. And I was like, wow, the will is her only authority. All I need to do is not to break her will. And my parents couldn't understand it. Of course, they were like, she's gonna breastfeed. She'll still 25. But knowing it is actually really helpful. Yeah. And then I don't feel like I'm a bad parent or things are difficult. It's actually, this is her way. And I just need to find a way to support her the best. Yeah. Okay. So if you're a mom, especially do it for you, right? And do it for your children as well. So what time now if you feel into the people who are listening, what would be the last message for them? What feels like you
Yeah.
want to tell?
The last message that I have for our listeners is the limit does not exist, but fear and self-doubt will keep you stuck and make you believe that it does. Let go of those limitations, let go of the fear and embrace, right? I know it's not going to be comfortable because any true growth isn't always comfortable, but you will thank yourself for the time that you spend learning more about you, diving into those beliefs and challenging what doesn't serve you, what's keeping you stuck.
And with that, I hear really putting yourself on the map. Huh? It's not just about other people, but actually putting yourself on the map.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Diamond. I'll put everything in the show notes. And listeners, I'll see you in the next episode. And we'll see who's going to come. We're going to talk more about sexuality and sexual desire with our next speaker. Bye.